Welcome to A Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club. My name's Noddy, and as always, I'm joined by Stevo. And in this episode number 9, we're going to talk about the game just played against the Cats, a few general topics in the AFL, VFL, the game ahead against the Demons, and finish off with our tips for the rest of the round. So to all you Cygnets and Swanlings out there, fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a very biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved Bloods. G'day, Stevo. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, mate, good. How about you?
Mate, I'm feeling very relieved, and let me tell you why. On Saturday, the 1st of May, in front of almost 30,000 people at the SCG, the 5th place Swans came up against the 4th place Cats, and in a much improved performance from last week, the Bloods fought their way back into the match with a gutsy finish to edge out the inaccurate Cats in the final minutes of a very thrilling game that had its fair share of controversy. Albeit the accurate Swans were victorious, scoring 14-6-90 to Geelong's 12-16-88. Okay, Stevo, first impressions, what do you think of that?
Oh, look, I mean, after last week against the Suns, which, let's be frank, was pretty awful, it was everything we'd hoped for and everything we'd asked for last week on the show. Massive improvement in effort, and it got a good result. And I really liked how they responded after a really poor first quarter. At quarter time, I thought, gosh, here we go. This is going to be just like the Suns, but against a better team that's going to hurt us. And they came back in the game and got a good win. And credit to the playing group. I mean, everyone in the media was lining up to write off the Swans 4-0 start as a bit of a fluke, and they proved them wrong. They showed that they can play some very good football.
Yeah, definitely. We certainly came out of the gates with a bang, and that first 30 seconds when Papley got the behind, I thought, look out, we might be on for a bit of a show here. But then the Cats ran away with it in the first quarter, as you said. But then after that, we came back into it. It was really tit for tat till the end of the game. It was really, really close game. But we played with much more energy than last week, so that was really pleasing. The other thing I'd say on first impressions, from the very beginning, it just felt like one of those games where the umps were going to have a bit of a say in things. And look, I'll be honest, the umpiring was not great over 4 quarters and not just the last 2 minutes. But anyway, that was one of my first impressions. In terms of your key takeaways, what were they?
I guess I already touched on it in the first comment, but I mean, the Swans are capable of playing some very good football. And as we keep saying, and we've been saying, since the beginning of the preseason, they're a young team. They're going to come and go each week. They put in a terrible effort against the Gold Coast. They looked shaky against the Giants and couldn't hold on for a win. And, even within games, they're going to be up and down. They played a pretty ordinary first quarter, notwithstanding that first 60 seconds where they were dynamite. And Tom Papley got that early goal. But then the next, 28 minutes of that quarter was pretty awful. And I think Geelong's score, I heard on the coverage, was the highest first quarter score of any team in season 21 so far. So we conceded that and then came back into the game. So you're going to fluctuate even in a game. David King on First Crack on Fox Footy, at least I can access it on the streaming thing that we have here. David King compared it to a little kid who needs a nap. They're a young team. They're coming up and they get to a point where they've done everything they can. They need a bit of a nap. The nap was, the Giants and the Gold Coast game. And then they've woken up from the nap and boom, they're back out. And once they've had their nap, they're rearing and ready to go, yeah, fair enough. They've had a little rest and here we come. We're back at it. So then I guess the second point was that I think, and I've been sort of thinking this a bit the last couple of weeks, that we seem to perform better against the better teams that want to play their way. We've beaten 3 of the last year's preliminary finalists so far in Richmond, Brisbane and Geelong, 2 of those away in really, really strong efforts, and then sort of dropped it a bit against weaker teams who really bring the game to us and try and attack our game style. So I'm thinking maybe the lack of a Geelong team who was just determined to destroy us, which is what Gold Coast did and what Giants did and what Essendon did, might have helped the Swans to rediscover a bit of their game style as well.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. For me, I mean, our accuracy clearly won us the game. But, we also played patches of really good footy and that's what got us back in the game to be able to, still be in it. For me, the other thing, Tom Hickey's individual performance cemented his value to the Swans. I know we've spoken at length about him and the way in which he came to the club, and I was skeptical at first. But, wow, with him out for a couple of weeks and then coming back, you could just see the difference that he makes to the team. And look, he really is one of the AFL's best rucks at the moment. And I think we're going to touch on that later on. But yeah, he just really impressed me. I'm going to go straight into the quarter by quarter breakdown now, Stevo. We're going to look at the first quarter. As we've said, the Cats basically demolished us. They scored 5 goals to 1 in an extremely dominant first quarter. Second quarter was 3 goals all. Excuse me, I've skipped a quarter. My apologies. First quarter, it was 6 goals to Geelong to our 2. Second quarter, it was 5 goals to 1. So we really came back in the second. In the third, we had 3 goals apiece. And then in the fourth, it was 4 goals to Sydney and 2 goals to Geelong. And so obviously we got up by 2 points there in the end. In terms of stats, Steve, throw me some numbers that you found interesting.
Look, the only number I think that really looked good for the Swans was the final score. Honestly, if you look at the stat sheet for the team stats, Geelong dominated just about every key category and they just didn't take advantage of their opportunities. So yeah, the main one was the scoreboard to me, which was Geelong 12-16, so 28 scoring shots, and Sydney 14-6, 20 scoring shots. So a difference of 8, but we managed to kick more goals, which was what was important. And that's something we can't do that every week. We can't rely every week on the better teams being that inaccurate, but for this week it was enough to get us across.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just picking inside 50s out, looking at that one stat alone, and it was well documented, the Swans had 39 to the Cats 65. So really, you look at that alone and you think, how do we actually win the game? And so when we break it down further and we look at the percentage of goals that from those inside 50s, it was elite. It was 35.9%. Percent of our inside 50s became goals. And last week we spoke about how against the Suns, it was only 17% and 30% being a very good mark for teams who are striving to be in the top 4. So this week we've effectively more than doubled our effort from last week. We also had eight different goal kickers this week. So it's good to get that spread. We had 19 fewer inside 50s in the game against the Cats than our round 1 to 6 average of 58. But our overall conversion rate was 70%. So not just the percentage of goals from inside 50, but just our total conversion rate. That really is the thing that saved us. As you were saying, we won on the scoreboard. They were inaccurate. That's really the thing that was the main stat. In terms of, let's take a couple of minutes here. We're going to address it. There's been some heated debate online. Let's look at the free kicks because that's also a stat. Geelong had 22 free kicks to Sydney's 16. Now, I said earlier, my first impression was the umpiring felt quite one-sided at times. And at the ground, there was a lot of booing and hissing and disappointing calls from the umpire, or umpires rather. Let's just quickly address the elephant in the room, the mistaken not 15 at the end of the game that Fox Footy did their best to highlight by doing that wonderful arrow mock-up to prove that it was 21 point however many meters. Some people online had sworn that they had heard touched play on, but I listened to it over and over and over and over again. I couldn't hear touched. It was clearly a mistake by the umpire. It definitely went more than 15, although I think you were saying offline that the position that the umpire was in when he made the call would have made it very difficult for him to be able to assess in that split second that the ball was probably going to go 15. Do you want to talk about a little bit on that, Stevo?
Sure, yeah. There's a few things. If you look at it from the umpire's perspective as to why that call, because it's a mistake. Like, I'm not trying to say as a one-eyed Swan supporter that it was only a 14-meter kick because that's garbage. Obviously, it was further than that.
Well, Stevo, I tried to, as a one-eyed Swan supporter, I tried to figure out that, and my best calculation was it was 16 meters at most.
Yeah, so we agree Fox it was a mark. Like, it was far enough to be a mark. We agree that, but I think from the umpire's perspective. First of all, there is a tendency in the way that the game is umpired for when you get those really scrappy kicks that just go pretty much straight up in the air out of a pack or in a really heavy contested situation, just to call not 15, play on anyway. That's the tendency a lot of the time, first of all. Second, where the umpire is positioned is actually a very hard position to see how far that ball is going to go, because the umpire is actually behind the line of the kick as it's traveling, as opposed to sort of square to it. So like parallel to the line of the kick. So you can actually get a point of reference between A and B, where the ball leaves and where the ball lands. So that's another thing that makes it very hard for the umpire, I think, in this situation to know the distance. And then the third one is that if you look at the replay, Jeremy Cameron actually starts much, much closer to the kicker than where he catches the ball. He moves at least, 5, 6 something meters to go and mark that ball. So when the umpire is seeing a quick snap go up, he's seeing all of the crowded players in a small space, and then where the ball actually ends up landing is closer to the point post. So it's a really tough one for the umpire to get that. And yeah, it was a wrong call, but it's a tough thing to umpire that 15 meters at the best of times, let alone in that situation.
And let's not forget, the Cats got the rub of the green against the Lions earlier in the year when Blitzars was clearly holding the ball on the buzzer. I'll also bring it back to the Swans and Cats game. The first Cats goal of the game was Graham Myers in the first quarter. It was fed by an inside 50 kick by Henderson to him. That looked like it was about 13.7 meters, Stevo. But look, let's not go into it. I think we can all agree that the umpire made a mistake. It went our way this time. It certainly hasn't always gone our time and gone our way all the time, and it won't do that in the future. But sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't. So we say thanks to those Cats fans who appreciated that. And I think even Chris Scott was quite, the Cats coach was quite diplomatic in the game afterwards, wasn't he? What did he say against Stevo?
Oh, he was, yeah, in his press conference after the game. And if you're interested, you can find all of these on the AFL website. They're all free to watch. If you listen to Chris Scott, I mean, he says, look, they're tough calls the umpires are asked to make. And then the thing that he really says at the end is, if we're going to pick on this call, then let's go back and look at all the calls that happened through the game. And given how difficult a game it is to umpire, why aren't we instead saying, isn't it amazing that they don't get more of these wrong because it's such a tough game to umpire? And I thought that was quite a gracious way for him to approach it in the post-match when he can't have been happy. He must have been fuming, right? They've just lost a tight game. And to have that level of perspective, I thought was good of him.
Look, personally, I think in a couple of years ago, he probably wouldn't have been as diplomatic as that. But he did seem very, what's the word? Graceful. I want to say graceful or gracious. But yeah, look, I think he's right. If you're going to pick apart one call in the dying seconds of a game, then you're going to have to do it for every single call that's made throughout a game. And that's not really what the game's about. So, look, obviously you and I and all the other Swannies out there, we're stoked that it went our way this time. But, we've come away with the chocolates and that's it. We've just got to leave it at that.
And there's one other thing I think that we didn't mention, which we talked about before too, is there seems to be an assumption in all of the analysis of this that Cameron was going to kick the goal. He took the mark pretty much on the point post, and the siren would have gone before he'd taken his kick. So he can't run around. He's a left footer, sure, but he still can't run around and improve the angle. So it's still a very tough kick to nail. He's a good player. Chances are maybe he gets it, but we don't know that.
Yeah, it's not given. Everyone was sort of saying that it was definitely going to happen. But the other thing is, he probably should have got called with holding the ball, just like Hayward did earlier. But and then also Rowbottom was definitely taken high by Selwood. So look, I've dug a little bit deeper into a couple of those other plays at the end of the game that were critical. But yeah, I think we can just leave it there and say, look, it was what it was. And we're grateful this time, but we know it won't always go our way. So we'll just have to remember this game against the Cats and say, look, we got it then. And we might not get it in the future, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. All right, Stevo, what were your favourite moments of the game, mate?
I got one quick one and then a slightly longer one. One was in the just before halftime, 3.5 minutes to go before halftime on the countdown clock. Wicks gets the ball. It's gone over the back of a contest. He's just inside 50. He's under pressure, and he looks across and he sees Florent free. He gets it quickly on his boot. Florent goes back and takes a set shot at goal. And the reason I like this one is because he didn't just get his blinkers on, throw the ball on his boot towards goal, or give a rushed handball, or go straight into contact. Instead, he really quickly assesses his options, sees a free player across that's inside the 50 and nails him. So that was just a really good piece of play by Wicks there, individual piece of play. So that's an individual thing that I wanted to highlight. And then a really good piece of team play that happened in the fourth quarter, at the very beginning, 19 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, so 1 minute in. there was some really controlled, patient ball movement that led to a goal by McLean. And the ball gets kicked in. I think Dawson kicks it in. Hayward takes a strong mark from the kick in on the far side. And then he first looks inside for the short. They're trying to do it, but Geelong have done their homework on the Swans, and they've closed off that short inside kick. They don't let him take it. So then the City goes short to Hickey on the wing, and they get held up. They don't have another short option. So what Hickey does, instead of booming it down the line, he waits, and then he sees that he's got Warner inside short. He goes for that, like a sideways short one to Warner, who's then able to switch the ball all the way across the other side of the field. And we bring it up through Kennedy and Goulden, and then a long kick to McLean in the goal square, who marks and goals. And yeah, I like this because it comes from patient play and not getting sucked into that long kick down the line that Geelong were trying to force, which is what we've been sucked into in the previous couple of weeks. And it was the Swans responding with some patient play and some quite mature play, which I really liked.
Yeah, and Tom Hickey was a big part of that. But my ones were I guess a couple of minutes into the first quarter, inevitably going to be something to do with the Chad. But yeah, Warner's basically his, I don't know if you call it a shake and bake goal, where he got past Atkins and then nailed it from the 50. But yeah, the play itself started with Melican, who took a strong contested mark in the defensive half. And then he kicks to McLean, who taps it down, does some good contest work, taps it down to Hickey, who roves, who handballs to Hayward, who handballs to Warner, who just, I don't want to say breaks the ankles of Atkins because it wasn't that dramatic, but it was just a really classy move. And just Chad, he just continues to show that he's got a lot of, he's got a lot of elements to his game. And I think in the past couple of weeks, I've been sort of pleading for him to kick these running goals from the 50, and he did this week. So I was very happy about that. So that was my first one. The second one was the last goal, our last goal of the game. So with about 2 minutes or so to go in the fourth quarter. So obviously Hayward had earlier played on from Sinclair's free kick in front of goal, and that was a complete mind blank. But he made up for it by getting that amazing mark in the defensive, I guess, near our goal square. And then from there, we worked it all the way up the field, basically to Sinclair's assist, a handball to Papley, who steps in and out and then moves on to the left for a left foot snap to get us in front with about a minute and a half to go. And that was just so, we went completely nuts at that point of the game. Everyone around us were just screaming and spilling beers, and it was just such an incredible moment. You can hear it in the crowd. It was, goosebumps, mate. But yeah, I mean, there were a fair few, but it was a pleasing game overall. But yeah, no, it was a good night. I think you might still hear, I'm still a little bit hoarse from the game because I was screaming my head off. But that's what's that, 3 days ago now. So must have been rough on Sunday and Monday. But anyway, Steve, let's get into the 5 best players on the ground. So the A-Bob medal using the 5-4-3-2-1 scoring system, with 5 points being the best. So kick us off, mate.
Sure. So we got Tom Hickey 5, Ollie Florent 4, McLean got 3, and 2 to McCartan, 1 to Mills.
Yeah, awesome, mate. I gave Hickey 5, Florent 4, McLean 3, Warner 2, and Rowbottom 1. So here we can see we've got Hickey, Florent, McLean the same, and McCartan, Mills, Warner, Rowbottom different. So let's talk about Hickey, Florent, and McLean first, mate. We've touched on Hickey before. Let's delve into his game. Why was it so good?
I mean, there's not many ruckmen in the league who can have a presence at the contest when the ball is in the air, and then again when the ball is on the ground, and win the clearance. I mean, I think he led our clearances again as a ruckman, and then also around the ground. He's doing everything that an elite ruckman should do, and I think that he's probably below Max Gawn at Melbourne. He's the form ruckman in the comp after Gawn.
I think that's a totally fair comment. I really do. And he had 10 clearances, 23 hitouts, and 20 disposals, but he also had that goal. But he's just his presence. I mean, we're immediately a better team when he's in the team. And that's not to take anything away from Sinclair, who continues to soldier on. And he played a very important role for us as that second tall marking target in the forward 50. But yeah, look, Tom Hickey, wow. The Hick. I think Horses refer to him as the Hick, so I guess that's his nickname now. But I'm happy with that because, wow, the Hick, he just gets it done, doesn't he? Ollie Florent. Ollie, wow. He had 26 disposals, 2 goals, 2 really important goals. He had 7 inside 50s and 4 clearances. I just thought he was very influential in this game. Did you see it the same way?
Yeah, he was. And the thing I liked really about his game above all else was in that last quarter when the game was on the line. And I really like players who step up when the game is on the line in the last quarter, when it's there to be won, and say, no, I'm going to have an impact on this contest. And that's exactly what he did. I think he had 9 or 10 touches in the last quarter. He was a very, very strong presence. The way he used the ball was very good. And he said, I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to make sure we get the win. And they did.
Yeah, and look, our next play that we had was Hayden McLean, who kicked 4 goals, and it was the first time he kicked 4 at the AFL level. And obviously, he's been coming in for when Buddy has been injured or rested, but he played so well, and we'll go onto this later. But he must keep his spot. He was marking well. He was an excellent forward target, and just the fact he kicked those 4 goals, wow, it was such a great game for him, right?
Yeah, and contested marks deep in the forward line for him is so valuable. Like it's great to take contested marks anywhere on the field because of what that means in the context of how you're moving the ball in the play. But if you can take a contested mark 10 meters out from goal or 20 meters out from goal, then most of the time you're going to kick a goal, and that's a really huge impact. I mean, you only need to take 3 or 4 of those marks in a game to have a massive say on how the game goes.
Well, I've got him listed as 4 marks. I don't know if they're contested marks, but you probably hazard a guess and say that those 4 marks of his were contested. So, and they may or may not have led to those 4 goals. I probably should have looked into that a bit closer before I commented on air. But yeah, no, he just. I think that was the other thing that separated our game, apart from effort, obviously against the Suns the previous week. We got a lot of inside 50s last week, but we couldn't really score. And this week, conversely, we didn't have that many entries, but we were scoring, and he played a really big part of that. And yeah, just really well earned for the 3 points in the ABOB medal, mate. All right, so tell me why you chose McCartan and Mills.
McCartan, I mean, he did a fantastic defensive job on Hawkins, Tom Hawkins from Geelong, one of the best forwards over the past decade of the AFL. He did really, really well on him. Hawkins wasn't really a factor in the game for much of it. Nor was Cameron, really. I think that our defensive pairing did very, very well. And McCartan, I think in Rampy's absence has sort of, he's starting to step up a bit as that sort of lead defender, like senior defender, which is really good to see from such a young guy who's not so experienced down there. And then Mills, I mean, he went back this week. He played mostly in the back line, and he had a couple of clangers, but mostly when he got the ball, he used it really, really well. Although poor Mills, because he was leading our medal last week, he was a runaway leader, and Hickey's back for a week and he's made up 9 votes on him. So poor Callum. We were actually joking when we saw Hickey included in the team that maybe Hickey'd been having a listen to us and he'd heard that he was behind in the medal, and he got a bit of rehab done to get himself up so he could pull back some votes on Mills. And if that's the case, then good on him. He's done it. He's pretty much
actually now. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's actually a good point we haven't really touched on. The fact that Hickey was named. That how remarkable. I mean, he was out for 6 to 8 weeks, and then the next week he's training all week and picked, and it's something to do with the fact he'd already done a PCL before, so he was used to it, or he maybe doesn't have one anymore. But the fact that he was picked and played so well, yeah, just goes into why we both chose him. But sorry, we're on to other players, but I just felt like I had to go back to Hickey there. But
it's all about Hickey. I think this week he killed it.
It really was the Tom Hickey show. But I'm going to say why I chose Warner and Rowbottom. Obviously, the Chad I mentioned before is my favourite moment. I just thought he continued to play. We didn't have as many disposals this week like he did last week, but he kicked that goal. He had 6 tackles. He was just very handy, and he just continues to be fantastic around the ground. And yeah, he's just one of my favorite players. And lastly chose Rowbottom, who probably could have been 2 instead of Warner, but yeah, the soft spot for Warner came through, I think. But yeah, Rowie had 21 disposals. He kicked that ultra important goal, our second last of the game, to really get us back in the game. He had 4 tackles. He had a few clangers, but it didn't matter because it just showed his work around the ground. He took that incredible goal in front of the member stand, I think in the I guess that was the third quarter, where he just reeled it in with one hand, just cool as a cucumber. But yeah, Rowie really stepped back. Obviously, his second week back from that pretty horrific knee injury. You wonder if he's still recovering from that a little bit. You're hoping he's recovering in games, but the fact he's playing like he's playing makes you think that he's going to continue to go from strength to strength. And some of these younger guys that we've called out, Florent and Rowbottom, really their efforts translated in a fantasy sense. So if you've got nothing else to add there, I'll move over to the fantasy update, where we look at our AFL fantasy team, a bevy of bloods consisting solely of current Swans and a few ex-Swans because we had to get them in due to injuries. In terms of the top five, we only have one of the top five high scores of the game. The highest scoring cat was Cam Guthrie on 118. After round 7, a bevy of bloods has dropped about 1,500 spots to sit 77,958th overall. We scored a terrible 1,209 points for the round, and that actually ranked us 92,000th in that individual round, which is really, really bad. Our top five Swans, Florent was on 100, which is our highest, Rowbottom 92, Mills 92, Hickey 92, and Lloyd 92. So very strangely, 4 players all on 92 there. It was quite unique I haven't really seen that very often. I wish they'd all been on 122, but it wasn't meant to be. Anyway, luckily I had Lloyd as captain, so his 92 became 184 because you get double points for captain. Also, Nankervis had another nice score in the 90s for a second week in a row. In terms of injuries and outs, obviously with Hewitt, Campbell, Blakey, McDonald going out, as well as Gould and Ling still being on the field. And then we had 6 players on the field who did not play, which is simply put, breaking all laws of fantasy footy. But we do it in the name of the Bloods. Obviously ran the risk and left Stevens on the bench, and in doing so missed access to his handy score of 63. He had a pretty decent game. I want to see him work a bit harder around the in the tackle space, but he's first week back, so hopefully can go from strength to strength from here. Also, let's hope that Thursday night team reveals is actually reinstated. I saw that the AFL did a bit of a vote there, and 95 or 94% of the 13,000 people that took the poll said, "Oh my God, please bring it back. I'm sick of these rolling team announcements." So hopefully that'll come back into play. And that's actually a really helpful thing for fantasy. It makes managing the team a lot easier because you can just focus on seeing the teams on a Thursday night and be done with it. All right, moving on to the match review office. Luke Parker was fined for forceful front-on contact against Bradley Close during the second quarter. He can accept a $2,000 sanction with an early plea. Stevo, very quickly, what did you think of that?
The Luke Parker one?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I don't have a very high opinion of the AFL match review system or tribunal, which I guess we'll talk about a bit more in a bit. But whatever, if that's what their little tables tell them it's worth, then fine.
I thought it was a bit soft, to be honest. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. All right, segment 2, moving on to AFL hot topics. We're going to have a bit of a chat about a few things going on in the AFL as well as a VFL update. So let's start with the VFL update, Stevo. Tell us about how we went against the Cats in the VFL.
Yeah, I mean, the Cats Swans in the VFL was almost the opposite of what happened across the road. They played again on that Tramway Oval in the Swans training field next to the SCG, and it was pretty much the opposite. I mean, the Swans were more or less in control most of the game, and then they couldn't get it done. They couldn't put it on the scoreboard. They couldn't do anything with their dominance and control of the game, and the Cats managed to get up with the win. In terms of players who were good, Robbie Fox was excellent. Campbell was also very good, getting a lot of ball, which was good to see, get a bit more touch, get a bit more confidence. Amati, we're not entirely sure how we say his name. Joel Amity, the young Swan, plays like sort of ruck forward. He did really well, kicked some goals. And Logan McDonald also was good. Other senior players who have been in the seniors recently, Blakey he played quite a bit around the middle. He didn't do much really, certainly not enough to have him banging down the door for senior selection. So I guess he'll be in there at least for another week. And yeah, they were the main ones. Did you see the game? Did you watch it or?
No, I only really saw a little bit of the first quarter, unfortunately. I got caught up rewatching the AFL game a couple of times. So,
Yep.
I was texting you, and it looked like you had a good read of it. So I thought I left it with you this time. I did see that incredible mark. I sent a couple of screenshots to you of Robbie Fox. I think it was in the first quarter where he just rode up on the back of the player in front of him. I didn't quite catch the opponent's name, but yeah, it just reminded me of that mark he took. I think it was down in Tassie one year, maybe against the Dockers. That doesn't make sense. Why would the Swans and the Dockers have played in Tassie? No, Robbie Fox is from Tasmania. That's what my brain is telling me. But like no, actually, it was against the Cats in Geelong. I think he took an absolute screamer, and the commentators on the day called him Flying Fox, and that stuck in my mind and was reminded when I saw him take that mark in the first quarter. But I watched I watched the highlights. And in the previous weeks, I think Malachi Carruthers, obviously there's a few ahead of him in the pecking order, but that guy's not doing much wrong. He's so composed. His kick he's got a very nice kick as well. But yeah, it's really one to watch, I think, because he's sort of in the vein of Lloyd, Cunningham, Hewitt in that small, lockdown, almost lockdown defender / can use the ball well role. But yeah, really, really astute pickup there, you would say, at this early stage. But yeah, one to keep an eye on. How did Paddy McCartan go, mate?
He didn't have his best day. Actually, before we go on to him, there's a couple, because we've got quite a bit to talk about with Paddy, given the last couple of days following the game. One other thing that we picked up last time, that tree issue that you talked about, that big tree, that's been resolved. So my guess is that they've moved the cameras rather than chopped down the tree. But either way, the tree is no longer a problem watching the game. But seriously, it's very hard to watch. I only do it out of love for the team. It makes me seasick watching the camera work at that ground. It is really, really difficult. I feel
it
dizzy.
Looked like some sort of dogmatic cinema, didn't it? Like it was sort of handheld, like Blair Witch style.
Exactly.
What they needed. Sorry, Swans. Again, if you're listening, we love you and thank you. But put it back on the crane where it was, but just move it back to where it was. But obviously, thank you for lopping the trees. But yeah, maybe it's difficult when they switch. They switch so quickly to those different angles. It was hard to watch, wasn't it?
It is very difficult to watch. And one other thing, and this comes to the camera work as well. In the VFL, they have this rule where at every stoppage, you need to have 2 players each 50. And so it results in the players having to sprint really fast back to get into position. And the commentators constantly talk about it, but we never see it on the screen because the camera doesn't show it. So maybe some more wide shots would be nice of the field as well, so we can get more of an idea of how the play is looking. But besides that, the other one I wanted to point out, Jackson Thurlow, ex-Swan, played for Geelong in the game.
No way.
Yeah, okay. He was out there.
He came from the Cats, didn't he? We picked him up from the Cats, and we both actually spoke about him being one of those really handy utility players that we're a bit surprised to see us let go at the end of last year. How funny.
Yeah, also Tasmanian, if I'm not wrong. I think
he's a Tassie. Yeah, I think he's from Launceston, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, so he was there. Good to see him running around. I bet you he thought when he left the Swans he wouldn't play on that training field again in his life, and then here he is running around for the Cats.
Wacko Jacko getting a 4-point win. Well,
in the VFL, done. Yeah. So then you talked about Paddy McCartan. He started in the forward line, which was exciting. I thought, okay, good, we're going to see him up forward. He'd been playing defensive the first couple of rounds, and he only got, I think, 1 touch or something, and then later on he was off with an injury. So that was the end of Paddy for the day. And then it emerged earlier this week, or maybe on Sunday or something, that he had actually also decked a bloke behind the play and was up at the tribunal. Yeah, it was a nasty. I mean, if you see the video, he sort of squares him up, takes a swing, misses, and then takes another one and cracks him on the head and then runs off. It did not look good at all. He got 5 weeks from the VFL tribunal, so he's going to be out for a while.
We had actually planned to talk about him anyway, because obviously the mid-season draft is coming up, and that's why we prepared this point to say, look, Paddy McCartan, should we get him? Will we get him? Should we try to get him? And then obviously this 5 game or 5 week ban is coming to play after that complete brain fade, where he decked the Cats captain in the opening minutes of the game, wasn't it?
I don't know, because I only saw it afterwards in the game because it was off camera, so it was we only saw what was playing on the ball, and then it was early at least.
goodness. Oh, obviously, you and I have spoken about this before. We don't want any of this sort of stuff in the game. If it's a non-footy act, get it out of the game.
Yeah.
I think you said that you had read his his defense at the match review or the VFL match review, and what was it against Stevo? Just real quickly.
It was pretty flimsy. I mean, you've got to put up a defense. You go to the tribunal. I guess you need to do something, I suppose. And the defense revolved around the idea that he was frustrated. He was trying to get separation on his opponent, and then the secondary part of it was that he had a lot of remorse for it, which of course he did and does. But then also they talked about him being a diabetic and his blood sugar levels had been low before the game, and he tested them before the game, and then he'd taken some of those like sugar supplements, like the little jelly tubes, whatever you call them, to rapidly increase his blood sugar, and then he went out and played. I don't see that as something that should have an impact on the outcome, because why couldn't he just sit on the bench until he gets a reading which is back in his normal range? That's what I don't understand with that. So I don't see that as relevant to the defense, given his clear understanding and awareness of his own condition. I don't think that should be a mitigating factor. And then, the remorse too. Like, he hits the bloke and he squares him up. He looks at him, hits him, and then runs off on his lead rather than checking for his concern. So I think he was very lucky to get 5 weeks. I think 5 weeks was light. And given what we've seen in the last few years, 7 to 8 would maybe have been more like the VFL only asked for 6 weeks. So he got 5, but I was surprised they only asked for 6.
Makes you think that Heaney was pretty lucky against Thatcher against the Bombers, because it looked like a similar sort of thing. Well, I mean, Heaney didn't hit him twice, but look, the irony is we planned to speak about him, right? But then he's 5 weeks out. Does that sort of change things now with the mid-season draft coming up? I mean, it's on Wednesday, the 2nd of June. So what are we now? We're early May. So do you think that might come into play in terms of, the clubs that were potentially looking at him? So obviously obviously the Swans listed him in the VFL. I think the intention was that Paddy would try and get back into the AFL because he's that level of player, and he'd been playing quite well in the early rounds of the VFL. But if we look just real quickly at the draft order of the upcoming mid-season draft, so obviously the bottom 4 teams will have the first pick, and that's North, Collingwood, Hawthorn, and Essendon. And our first pick, we've only got one available, mind you. We kept one spot open, presumably for Paddy Carton, because we're coming 5th. We're coming 5th? No, we're coming 4th now. We've got obviously the 4th last pick. So, a club like North Melbourne, who let go of Ben Brown and then didn't pick Logan McDonald, and really only has Nick Larkey, who's their tall target up forward, you would think would probably have had a red hot crack at Paddy McCartan potentially. But does something like this get in the way of that now? What's your read on that?
I was thinking a bit about this, and I guess it depends what you want out of a player from the mid-season draft. So if you want a player who can come in and have a fairly immediate impact at senior level, McCartan has got 5 weeks suspension, so that's going to be the mid-season draft +1. So even after the draft, he'll still have a week to serve. He's not going to be match fit because he can't play, so he's probably going to have to spend, close to a month getting himself into any sort of condition to even contend for AFL selection. So if a team wants to bring someone in at the halfway point to have some sort of rapid or at least minimal even on-field turnaround through a player, he's probably not your guy anymore. So maybe that means that some of those clubs be less likely to look at him. If you're looking at him more as a long-term deal, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, he's shown that he's gotten through his concussion thing. He's been able to play football at the second highest level in the country successfully for several weeks with no problems with the concussion so far. And he's a former number 1 draft pick who's proven at AFL level. Why wouldn't you chuck him a bone? They're paying nothing for him. He's going to he'll be on rookie money.
I mean, that's the other thing though. Like maybe, his desire maybe to be around his brother in Sydney out of that Melbourne bubble does come into play. And so the other thing we do need to acknowledge is that this conversation is based on whether he nominates, right? He's got to nominate for the mid-season draft as well as potentially go for the rookie draft at the end of the year. You would think that if, look, we'll have to look into it a bit more, but our understanding of it is that there's all these teams ahead of us that could could have a shot at him if he nominates. So I guess it's all depending on, as you're saying, what these clubs are and what they're looking for immediately or a little bit longer term. But it certainly would be a shame to not have a chance at him. But I mean, the other thing is the Swans have officially commented saying, they're remorseful. They don't condone that sort of action. They do think that it was completely out of character for him. And so I think that they, while they're not approving of the conduct, they're sort of sticking behind him. So that sort of shows that there's that, hopefully that nurturing, that development, and that ideally staying with the Swans. But I guess we'll know in about a month's time, mate.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey.
Yeah. All right. Just real quickly before I move on, the Port Adelaide Collingwood jumper saga. I mean, it's unbelievable that this is even an issue. We speak about this a lot. Give me your thoughts. Come on.
Oh, I agree. I can't believe we're talking about this. It's insane. I mean, the two key points for me are that there are many, many, many sporting leagues in the world that manage jumper clashes perfectly fine. We can talk about some examples in a minute. And second, that it seems to be up to Collingwood to make this decision. The AFL isn't the one that's calling the shots here, or at least that's how it appears through the media. I don't know what's going on, but they're to me are the 2 points that I just can't get my head around.
Absolutely, mate. And I think we were looking through it, and you're going to talk about non-AFL or VFL stuff, but even in the VFL alone, the Northern Bull Ants, founded 1882, they're also red and white. So I imagine that when the Swans play them, they'll just figure it out. One team will wear the majority white clash and no one will have a big cry about it. There's also Aspley and Hawthorn, they're brown and gold. The Coburg Lions and the Brisbane Lions, they're both called the Lions. Are the Lions going to say, hey, Coburg, when you play us, you can't call yourself the Lions? I think you said there was a couple, even in the footy, was the Tigers, didn't you say?
Yeah, Werribee. And they played last weekend. This is how I hadn't even thought about this, but I saw that Richmond Tigers were playing Werribee Tigers in the VFL, and they both play in yellow and black as the Tigers, and they wore different jumpers. It was quite simple.
Wow. So look, why is Collingwood the only club that seems to take such a hardline stance and have no room for movement? Must everything be so black and white to them? So that's a prepared line. I had to say that. But look, other sporting leagues around the world, I think you're talking about the Premier League, right? How many clashes do they have?
I did a quick count, actually, of the Premier League. There's 20 teams in the Premier League. It's one of the biggest sporting leagues in the world in terms of people watching it. It's probably the most well-known sporting league in the world, I would say, because it's global. Arsenal, Liverpool and Man United, 3 of the 4 biggest teams, all play in mostly red. Chelsea, the other big 4 team, plays in mostly blue, as does Brighton, Hove Albion, Everton, Leicester City. Aston Villa, Burnley and West Ham all wear maroon with light blue sleeves, and Fulham, Leeds and Tottenham all wear predominantly white. So that's 13 of 20 teams have a significant jumper clash, or kit clash as they call it in football, like European football. They manage fine. The NHL has plenty. NBA has plenty. NHL, all of these big money leagues all have plenty of color clashes. In international football, you go to the World Cup, like the FIFA World Cup, the biggest sporting event in the world. Australia plays Brazil, no problem. They wear clash shirts. Italy plays France, both wear blue, no problem. Spain plays Portugal, both wear red, no problem. England plays Germany. I mean, these are all big clashes between top 10, 12 world teams, excluding Australia, Brazil. And England plays Germany, white and white, they figure it out. So how is this a problem in Australian football?
It doesn't make sense. It's actually ludicrous. And I get quite offended by it. And I think that's why we've chosen to speak about it. But I mean, I think you do too. But like we're saying, it's not just when Collingwood plays Port. It's Collingwood is telling Port not to, like, what jersey to wear when they play any other team other than Collingwood. And I just think that it doesn't make sense to me. Like, sure, like when Port plays Collingwood at the MCG, Port should wear that really cool grey strip that they've got as the clash jersey. But then when Collingwood go to Adelaide Oval to play Port, Collingwood shouldn't wear their quote unquote clash jersey, which has a couple of thin black lines outside the large black bars, which looks exactly the same as their normal strip, right? I think it's maybe they wear white shorts, so that's the difference. But why doesn't Collingwood like create cool different jerseys? It would be more merchandise for them to sell. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, slap Scott Pendlebury's number 10 on the back of it and you can sell a bag of them. Like, what's the problem?
It doesn't make sense. I probably should have looked up, but when they were founded, but I'm pretty sure Port Adelaide is older than Collingwood. Collingwood's 1892, and I've got a feeling that Port Adelaide was maybe 1860, 70, 80, like older than Collingwood. And look, based on that alone is not reason enough for them to just get their way, but it's certainly a significant consideration, I think. So it just goes to show that, this feels like the Victorians pushing their weight around. And, I don't know, some people get it coshy, for him having all these passionate convictions or positions, but I say good on him. I think once a year they should be allowed to wear the prison bars if it's going to be this big of an. They should be able to wear it whenever they want when they're not playing Collingwood. But at minimum, if Port Adelaide wants to wear prison bars when they play Adelaide in the showdown, then why does Collingwood get to say no? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't see how it hurts anyone, and I don't see how this is somehow Collingwood's decision. Yeah.
Anyway, so we've had a fair enough whinge on that, so we may as well move on to the next segment. But thank you for entertaining me there, Stevo.
No, I think it's nonsense as well. Don't worry. Good
stuff, mate. All right, segment 3, we're going to look at the round ahead. In this last section, we're going to focus on 3 games, most importantly, the Swans' next game. Then we're going to look at 2 other games of interest, one by Stevo and one by me. After that, we're going to finish up by running through the rest of the tips for the round. Okay, so game 5 of round 8 is an away game for the now placed 4th Bloods, taking place this Saturday, the 8th of May at the MCG against the first place Melbourne Demons, with first bounce at 7:25 p.m. local time. All right, Steve, after the Cats game, how do we pull up? What's our injury status?
The only one is Milliken, who had like a hamstring or a groin or something against Geelong. And then on the other side of the ledger, I guess Hewitt is probably back from his concussion week off. So maybe he's one that's lined up to come in. And then there's others that they've talked about too.
Yeah, I think it was today. I think there was an announcement AFL-wide that both Dane Rampy and Lance Franklin are looking pretty good. I don't know if they use the word likely, but possible. So certainly in the frame. So let's just say Milliken, definitely it's a hammy and a groin, so he's out. Probably if Rampy's up, he just slots back. Well, not probably, definitely slots back into that back line with Tommy McCartan there. If Franklin's fit, who's coming out for him, mate?
Probably Sinclair, I'd say, because I don't think you can drop McLean after his effort last week.
No, absolutely not. And we spoke about that already. If Hewitt is fit, is he an immediate in, or do you think someone like O'Riordan or Cunningham holds their spot?
I reckon Hewitt for me, is a best 22 player. When he's fit, he plays, and O'Riordan's probably unlucky. He didn't really do much wrong, but yeah, Cunningham didn't have a great game. He certainly didn't have his best day. He was pretty sloppy with his disposal. But just because he's a bit of an older head, maybe you'd keep him in with all of those young ones. I'd probably say O'Riordan out for Hewitt.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Is Isaac the Heat Heaney, is he fit? Because he was dropping marks that he would normally take. I don't think his hand's right.
I don't think so either, but you never know. This is what I hate about players. As a coach, I've done a lot of coaching and still do, and I hate players, especially senior players, because they'll tell you they're fit, and the doctor says, well, yeah, they can play. But then they turn out an effort like that, and what do you do?
Yeah. Look, he's the kind of player that, if he's saying he's fit, you just got to say, yeah, why not? He also copped that massive knee to the stomach where he was severely winded. So it was lucky he didn't, break your sternum or rib. But to be honest, he probably would have played again next week anyway. He seems tough as nails, doesn't he?
And maybe he did break a rib in that hit. You don't know. This is the thing, because players will always, and I've played a lot and I've coached a lot, and players will always tell you they're fine, no matter what. They don't care. They'll say, I'm good. And then, you take the risk, don't you?
Buddy's a good example, isn't he? He's got that bone bruising, and the doctors are saying probably 4 weeks, and Buddy's like, give me 1.
Yeah, declares himself fit before even getting the doctor's report back.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a question. If Buddy isn't fit, does Sinclair hold, or do we bring Logan McDonald or Joel Amati back in?
I don't know, because, McDonald had a good week. I'd like to see McDonald and also Campbell, both of them, because they're finally finding some touch in the reserves, and I'd like to see them consolidate on that in the reserves and build a good body of work and then come back in rather than get put back in straight after a good game. So I'd like to see those two stay. Amadi has had a solid body of work over 3 weeks now, plus preseason in the reserves. I wouldn't mind seeing him come in and get a chance.
Yeah. I think it'd be nice to see how he goes, how Amadi goes with McLean up forward, because let's be honest, unless we, looking years down the track beyond Buddy, if we don't target another big full forward as the Swans have want to do in the past, then we've got these young and upcoming guys who clearly could step up and be, McLean, McDonald and Amadi, or McLean, McDonald and McCartan, the three Macs, that could be the future of our forward line. So it is exciting. Obviously Sinclair, as we've said, he played a role, but Amadi has been stringing together. Did he kick goals in the VFL?
Yeah, you got a couple. You got two, maybe three. He's been getting a couple every week, like 2 or 3.
Yeah, he got 3
week
against the Suns, and then I think he got 2 or 3, or I don't know if he's hit 4, but yeah, he's kicking, he's marking and kicking, so can't be too far away. But Robbie Fox, obviously, it was a finger, so you think his recovery is, he shouldn't be too far away. So I guess it depends on O'Riordan and Cunningham and then Hewitt. You wouldn't say Robbie Fox goes straight back into seniors next week, would you?
Oh, if they chose to put him in, I think he'll do well. He looked fine. Maybe they just want to give him one more to get him back into it after a long layoff. But I think he could slot straight in across the half-back line if they needed him to. Yeah,
definitely. He was such a good player for us last year, and we're all so stoked that we relisted him. So I don't think we've spoken about the opposing teams' ins and outs before, Stevo. So I just threw this in tonight. Let's just quickly talk about Melbourne, obviously, who we're coming up against. I think tonight they announced that Fritsch got off his potential 1-week ban on that sickening elbow to Tom Powell's head and jaw. So it looks like he'll hold his spot. It was looking like maybe Harms might come in for him, who's recovering from a wrist injury. They had a pretty big injury after the Roos game, didn't they? Who was it, mate? It was one of their defenders.
Yeah, Tomlinson got hurt, didn't he?
Tomlinson, yeah. I think a knee, wasn't it?
I can't remember, but he's certainly not playing this week.
Yeah, okay. So I think they're saying either, I think it's Harrison Petty may come in for him, or they're even talking about maybe Tom McDonald, who's been playing very well up front. He swings back, and then they can fit Sam Wiedemann, as well as Ben Brown in the forward line. That's pretty imposing if they do. So, look, either way, I think the D's are going to be very, very dangerous. But in terms of our Swannies, mate, who do we see flying high and why?
Oh, look, I think I've put the Moz on so many bloke. Last week I said Heaney was going to be the one, and then look what happened. He didn't do anything.
Mate, I picked Papley.
Yeah, well, you did all right. Yeah.
He kicked 2 out of the 4 goals I predicted, but he kicked that last goal. So I'm going to claim that one.
Yeah,
I'm going to say there was a little bit of Noddy in that.
Yeah, Papley certainly showed a bit. So I'm going to say Wicks, just because he had a great day at the MCG last time he was there, and he did some really nice things against Geelong. So I reckon Wicks is going to, maybe not be best on ground like last time at the MCG, but at least be one of our, consistent performers.
Yeah, nice one. I see Will Hayward as, like we didn't really speak about him through. We mentioned he got caught holding the ball and then took that nice defensive mark. He played on from Sinclair's free kick. But apart from that, around the ground, he was leaping and clunking like an absolute man on fire, a sticky-handed bat out of hell, mate. Like he was he was looking good. He was looking fresh. I think he will continue that trend. I'm just hoping he can put a couple of goals behind it. So I'm predicting he'll score a couple of goals and carry on with his form. In terms of the opposition, mate, which demon players do we need to be wary of?
I think Max Gawn is really important for them. And I said before that I think that Hickey is on form, the current second best ruck in the comp after him. You can put Grundy and Nick Nat into that calculation as well, but I think on current form, we're going to see a really exciting battle between the 2 top rucks, which is what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, look, I think Maxi's got him in height and weight. I think Maxi's a little bit bigger, but yeah, I think Hickey just moves so well. Like we've spoken a lot about his clearance work. It's going to be a very interesting battle, and I think that they essentially gave Max an in-game rest last week. I think he was only at the centre stoppages only 50% of the time. So they had young Luke Jackson, who's seriously looking the goods, playing a lot more ruck, and they moved Max, I think, around a bit to give him a bit of a rest. But I think he's going to be ready to come out and fire. So it's going to be very interesting indeed. For me, Bailey Fritsch has just been silky smooth this year. I think he kicked 6 against the Roos. Obviously got off when he probably shouldn't have, but look, they've already made that decision, so it's play on. I was going to say if Fritsch wasn't playing, then I think Kosea Pickett is really the guy we need to be stopping. He is just incredible. I love watching him. He's just so he can do anything. Like, he's just as good as a midfielder as he is as a small roving forward. He's been kicking goals, and he's just an X factor. So we've got a huge job ahead of us for whoever marks up on him. I'm guessing someone like Cunningham, if he stays, or O'Riordan or Hewitt, that sort of triangular sort of, I guess, selection decision that we were talking about before. But yeah, I mean, have you seen him, mate?
Yeah, he's really good. He's one of these players who, he's a small forward, and I think small forwards are, they're the kind of players that when your midfield is on top and you're getting a lot of opportunities, you see much more small forwards. It's a very hard position to play, and it's a very hard position to play if you're not dominating, getting the ball forward. And what Pickett is able to do, I think, which is quite rare for small forwards, is he still has quite an impact on the game, even when his team isn't dominating. And okay, this year they have been, but even previously when we've seen him, he's still able to be a part of the game and have a big impact, even if you're not getting your 60 plus inside 50s.
Oh, the D's did so well picking him up. I'm really quite jealous, to be honest. But all right, so what do we need to do to come away with a victory here, mate?
Look, I think what we did against Geelong after quarter time, it's just the effort, really. And they've shown they're good enough to beat the best teams. They've knocked off 3 of last year's prelim finalists. We've talked about that. And if they can continue to do that, and like I sort of mentioned a bit before, I think that a team like Melbourne is going to want to play their way, just like Geelong did, just like Richmond did, just like Brisbane did. They've got their own game that they bring. And maybe the Swans can take advantage of that by attacking that game and being the hunter rather than being the hunted, which I don't think a young team like the Swans maybe responded very well to. And then they were good back in that hunter role last week against Geelong after quarter time, and a bit more of that.
Well, I think it's safe to say we're underdogs again this week, so hopefully we can do that. For me, I think we need to clamp down on Petrarca and Oliver, and I'm hoping that if Rampy comes back in, we can put Mills back in the midfield. I'd love to see Mills on Petrarca for most of the day, and I think the Chad should be given Clayton Oliver, just because I'd be interested to see how he goes up against like an absolute elite midfielder. But yeah, we basically need to have a lot more inside 50s as well. But when they're delivered, they need to be delivered well. Otherwise, their interceptors, May and Lever, will absolutely punish us. So it's certainly going to be a task, but I think it's one we're up for. And if we look at the form line, obviously the Swannies are 5-2. Melbourne are the only undefeated team at this stage of the competition. Obviously, the Bulldogs lost to the Tigers last week. So in terms of our last 5, we have had a win, a loss, and a win, and the D's have had nothing but W's. In terms of the teams we've played versus the teams they've played, obviously we beat the Lions, beat the Crows, beat the Tigers, beat the Bombers, lost to the Giants, lost to the Suns, and then just beat the Cats. We've spoken, as you've mentioned, we've beaten a couple of last year's finalists, so I think we're in pretty good stead. In terms of the teams that the D's have played, they beat Adelaide. They beat sorry, I'm looking at the wrong info here, mate. Let's just say they've beaten everyone. They've beaten everyone. But who have they played? Can you remember off the top of your mind, top of your head, who they've played? Have they played very good teams?
Just recently, they've beaten Richmond at the MCG. That's one that I can think of in the last couple of weeks, at least.
Oh yeah, that was a very good game. They bet them by it was 27 or so points, wasn't it? Yeah, they ran away from them in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, I watched that game. They did really well.
All right, so let's say they're playing good footy and they've played against decent teams. So we're certainly we've got a job ahead of us in terms of the head-to-head over the past 5 years. So we won last year up in Cairns at Kazali's, and that was probably our best game of the year. But before that, in 2019, the D's beat us 95 to 42 at the MCG. In 2019, the first game of that year, we beat them 100 to 78 at the SCG. 2018, they beat us 87-78 at the MCG. And in 2017, they beat us 85-50 at the MCG. So playing at the MCG, they seem to win in the past 5 years. And the average scores are about 67 to us and 78 to them. So it is usually a fairly close affair on average. But when it comes to the MCG, the D's might have us, mate. So in terms of tipping, who are you picking, Stevo?
I'm going to pick Melbourne, but with a bit of a hope that the Swans can do what they did last week and get over them. Melbourne's probably due for a loss, but I'm still not brave enough to tip against them. So Melbourne.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the wise call. I'm going to go a little bit more cavalier here, mate, and I'm going to back the Bloods in. We're going to back up our effort against the Cats, and we're going to hopefully with a bit more space on the MCG and get back to those that hunting way as you've spoken about. So I'm going to back the Bloods in.
Good stuff.
All right, yeah, nice one, Stevo. If a group of Swans is called a bevy of Swans, then what is a group of demons called?
Yeah, we finally got an interesting one. I like this one. A legion of demons. So I can imagine legions of demons attacking across the open spaces of the MCG. So a legion is what demons are.
Oh, that is a cool one, isn't it? Legion of demons.
Yeah, like Roman centurions, you know. Are
you calling Romans demons, mate?
No, I'm calling demons Romans. What am I calling? What?
We're calling demons okay, we're confusing ourselves here.
It's a legion of demons. There's lots of them. They're dangerous. Be careful. They've got spears and catapults and stuff.
And horns and there's a whole land of them.
Yeah, proceed with caution.
Proceed with caution. All right. In terms of the games of interest, I think you're going to kick us off with Richmond and Geelong.
Yep. So this is the other top 8 game this week besides the Swans and the Demons. Richmond versus Geelong, MCG. I think that's where Richmond always play. So I don't know why I felt the need to announce it. In terms of the ins and outs, Cotchin hurt his hamstring. Dustin Martin will slide back nicely into the team. And Grimes has got concussion. Vlastuin is looking good to come back. So, you know, bad outs, but also very strong ins for them. Myers was subbed out against the Swans with a leg injury. For Cats, doesn't look like he'll play. Charlie Constable, I'm going to pick him to come in because he's found some form in the VFL this week. And I really like the guy's name. So I think I'm going to... Charlie Constable is the coolest name, or one of the cooler names in footy. So
I'd like
Charlie...
to can I just say here, sorry to interrupt your intro. I think we should keep an eye on him because I think he could be a long-term replacement for Joey Kennedy. I'm just saying it here. But anyway, I'll pass back over to you.
Yep, and he's got a fantastic name to bring to the club. So let's hope.
Definitely.
And he's probably mates with Tom Harley and who's the bloke who's the other Geelong fella?
Gardner.
Him. So they probably know him. So last couple of games, Richmond have had a win and a loss and a win. Geelong have had a win and a loss against us. Richmond belted St Kilda, lost to Melbourne, and then they beat the Bulldogs. Geelong looked shaky against North, thrashed the Eagles at home, but everyone seems to thrash the Eagles at home, and then lost to the Swans. So I think Richmond's form line is much more convincing than Geelong's. In terms of key players, Dustin Martin, I reckon, is going to be raring to go after a week off. So watch out for him. And then Geelong, I think, need to get much more out of their two big forwards, Hawkins and Cameron, than what they got against the Swans last week. And based on all of that, I think that Richmond's best is just better than Geelong's best. They've just beaten the form team. They've got the best player in the competition coming back after a week off, and I reckon they'll be too good for Geelong.
So who are you picking? Oh, you going the Tigers, obviously.
Did you listen to my preview? I didn't say anything positive about Geelong in 3 minutes.
Well, I was waiting for the concrete confirmation. I tip the Tigers. Obviously, I need to keep my eye on you because you're the one who's keeping a record of the tipping comp. So
I am, and you have no idea if I'm being honest.
Exactly. So I just need to be careful when I can. All right, mate. I've chosen the showdown. Obviously, a game of great interest in the AFL calendar. It's the third place Port Adelaide Power versus the 13th place Adelaide Crows at Adelaide Oval on Friday, the 8th of May from 7:40 p.m. local time. It's the 49th showdown since 1997. And interestingly, each side has won 24 times. So this game will separate them. So one team at the end of the game will have won 25 times and the other still 24, unless, of course, there's a draw. which I might have put the Moz on them there. All right. In terms of injuries, round 7, Burton had some ribs, but it looks like Boak in terms of ins, Boak has recovered from a quad strain. Burton's ribs should be okay. And it looks like Bonner and Lennart have been performing well in the sample and are possible ins. In terms of the Crows, they had no injuries in round 7. They've got a couple of youngsters also playing well in the sample in the likes of Chase Jones, Worrell and Mackesy, but it just depends on which structure they go with. If their captain, Rory Sloane, has recovered from his confusing eye injury, then surely he will be an immediate in. In terms of the last form, the Power have, the last 5 games, the Power have lost against the Eagles, beaten Richmond, beaten Carlton, beaten St Kilda, and then lost against the Lions up in the Gabba. They're 5-2. Obviously, the 2 losses there against the Eagles and the Lions. In terms of the Crows, they have beaten the Suns, beaten the Roos, lost to Fremantle, lost to the Hawks, and lost to the GWS Giants in Adelaide. That was a big loss last week, wasn't it? So they're 3-4. And obviously their 3 wins are the Cats in round 1 all that time ago, and then the Suns and the Roos. So in terms of the key players, I think the Power, for the Power, it's Dan Houston, Ollie Wines, Carl Amon, Charlie Dixon, and Alir. Oh, how we miss you. But obviously Tom Hickey's doing really well, so that's cool. Crows, Rory Laird, Tex Walker, who is in unbelievable form. Just hope he can carry it on. We got Shoal, Ben Keys, and Riley O'Brien really needs to step up because he had a terribly quiet game against Mummy last week. In terms of the Power, they've only lost twice against 2 excuse me, frog in the throat, 2 other top 2 teams. I think they've got a very well-balanced team, and I think they're very capable of going very deep this year. The Crows have only beaten 3 teams, 1 current top 8 team, but that was back in round 1, as I mentioned. The other teams, Suns, who are coming 10th, playing better than what I think a lot of people realise or thought they were going to, and the Roos, who are still coming 18th. So for me, my tip, I believe the Power will win. How about you, Stevo?
Yeah, Power for me too, for all those reasons you said.
Yeah, nice one. All right, let's run through the rest of the games of the round. So game 1, as you mentioned, Tigers-Cats. We're both going Tigers. Game 2, 11th place Giants versus 15th place Bombers. In Homebush in Sydney on Saturday afternoon, I'm going with the Giants.
Yep, me too. They're starting to look like a good team again.
Yeah, it's scary. Game 3, we've got the 10th place Suns versus the 14th place Saints at Metricon on the Gold Coast. Saturday afternoon, I'm picking the Suns.
Yeah, me too. I can't tip St Kilda this year because you never know what they're going to do each week, so I'm just not bothering. I'm just going for the Suns.
Yeah, too inconsistent. Game 4, we've got the last place Roos versus the 17th place Magpies at Marvel on Saturday twilight. I'm going the Roos.
Yeah, me too. I just think that no one wants to go through a season without getting a win, and this could be their chance. So they'll be fired up, the Roos.
And obviously Magpies, they're in a bit of a world of hurt at the moment. So look, it's time to capitalise, I think.
As long as they get to wear their jumper, mate, that's the important thing, right?
Yeah. I wonder if they'll tell the Roos what colour they are.
Yeah. But, you can't wear stripes up and down. Actually, that's been a problem in the past. But anyway, carry on.
Game 5, as we've done, Demons versus Swans, and I'm going Swans. You're going Demons. Game 6, Power and the Crows. We're both going the Power. Game 7, we've got 16th place Hawks versus 8th placed Eagles at the MCG on Sunday afternoon. I'm going the Hawks for this one, mate.
Yep, I refuse to tip the Eagles away for the rest of the season. You can hold me to that.
Yeah, I've been burnt too many times already this season. So, yeah, for the same reasons, I'm going Hawks. Game 8, 2nd place Dogs versus 12th place Blues at Marvel on Sunday twilight. It's got to be the Dogs for a big bounce back.
Yeah, totally. Dogs.
Game 9, 9th place Dockers versus the 7th place Lions in Perth on Sunday twilight. I think the Lions are starting to heat up. I'm going the Lions.
Yeah, me too. They're building. I'm on Brisbane.
Yeah, hopefully they can have a crowd this week, but we'll have to keep following that. It was a
I
bit.
think no, they've moved it. They just announced today. This was a
Oh, really?
late mail. Yeah, they're going to play. They're switching the fixtures, so they're going to play this one in Brisbane. Fremantle's already in the process of flying out. They're going to play it in Brisbane, and then the Dockers are going to go to Melbourne, I think, and then they're going to hopefully go home the week after that, and then they're going to switch the fixture with their later round game against the Lions will be played in Perth.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks for that, Stevo.
Yeah.
All right. That then certainly cements my tip: the Lions to beat the Dockers in Brisbane for sure. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. On behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. We look forward to you joining us next time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Bevy of Bloods for updates and announcements. Until then, up the Bloods and calm the Swannies.